biggest story in town. Starmer and the coward Wes Streeting.
Botching the removal of Starmer will be the Labour Party's biggest mistake. Starmer is frantically trying to whip up support. His judgment, woeful, lacking, doesn't have any, is it's always somebody else's fault.
Starmer, Friday, 6 p.m, he clocks off. He's not going to do anything until Monday midday. People seem to think he's kind of lazy.
He looks exhausted. Those shots that were grabbed the other night with him in the back of the car, the man looks finished. They're going to destroy it. They want to destroy the evidence on there. And this is the real story of what's going on.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi, and as ever, on a Thursday, I'm joined by the Westminster Whisperer, Esther McVey. Esther, thanks for coming in. I know you've just come from the independent rape gang inquiry, and you're going to head back there, but you're going to tell us a little bit about that more towards the end of this episode.
I am all, what I can say though right now is it is so harrowing. Whether it's the people whose stories I'm listening to who were savagely raped, and I will say some of them tortured, whether it's the parents who didn't know how to protect the children, and questions about how the state failed them. But it is absolutely harrowing, and there are tears and tissues on the desk for when people do cry. So it's a lot going on, but I will talk a little bit more about that later.
Grand. Well, let's start with the biggest story in town, Starmer and the coward Wes Streeting, I'll call him.
Okay, well, I think botching the removal of Starmer will be the Labour Party's biggest mistake. I think they should have been surgical. They should have removed him. There was an opportunity to do so, and they bundled it. And I'm afraid there's going to be a drip, drip, drip of disintegration of the party and trust within the party and of the public to the party. I think it was a major mistake. Do you remember years ago, 2007, Brown bottled it to do the election and he lost. Them bottling this removal of Starmer will have devastating consequences. And you look why didn't the lead contenders go for it? Well, Angela obviously couldn't, Angela Rayner, because she's still sort of got the issue of non-payment of stamp duty hanging over. She couldn't, but Wes Streeting could have. And I'm afraid it was selfish decisions that he didn't go forward. They kind of thought, I don't want it now because we've got that by-election, Gorton and Denton by-election coming along. I don't want to do it now. And we've got the local elections in May. We don't want to do it now. Can I tell you, politics doesn't work like that. You don't say, I don't want it now, there'll be a better time. There is probably never a better time. But this was about survival of your party. But more importantly, it was about doing the right thing for the country. And they did not do. And you talk about Wes Streeting. Well, let's look at what happened on Monday. You had the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, Anisiobi, went out and publicly said the distraction needs to end and the leadership in Downing Street has to change. Now, there's a couple of stories going around at the moment. One that was meant to have been coordinated with Wes Streeting, who was then meant to come forward, get the cabinet on board,
So
and
they're working
actually
together.
and make the remove Starmer. The other one is saying, which I guess Wes Streeting's team is going to have to sort of put forward a counter argument. But the other argument I'm hearing is no, Labour's so toxic in Scotland that actually Sarwar had to distance himself from sort of Starmer to have any chance of not a complete implosion at their election. So that's why he did that. But if you look then what happened the rest of the day, Starmer is frantically trying to whip up support. He's going to his cabinet. Then they all came out one after another saying, we're going to support you, because supposedly Sarwar gave him 90 minutes to say, this is what I'm going to do. They were friends, so he gave him time to say, look, I'm going to come forward with this. So it wasn't such a shock to Starmer, and he managed to get a team together. He then later had his meeting with the Parliamentary Labour Party, all loyalists there, whooping everything up. It's fine, which is what you do when you're on the rocks. Didn't matter whether it was Theresa May, Boris Johnson, you have all the loyalists stuffed in the room, cheering and chanting, you're the best person ever. You come in and say, mea culpa, I've made a mistake, I didn't mean to do it, I'm going to fight as hard as I can, the country means a lot to it. This is like a routine that they all do when it is over. So he did that, but running parallel And this is the real story of what's going on. So you get caught in your own little world, sort of Labour MPs, it's all fine. Although some did say to me afterwards they knew it wasn't. But they're sort of in a state of paralysis. But running parallel in the House was a statement, which is quite strange. I don't really know why the government brought it forward, but a statement on standards in public life. The irony that they brought forward a statement to talk about standards in public life. And it didn't go as well as maybe they thought it was. They thought it was going to be a distraction. They were going to say, we're going to bring in new rules for MPs. We're going to make this tighter, that tighter. You won't be able to do anything. And all that came about time and time again was the judgment or the lack of judgment of Starmer. So that was one point that came through. And the question I asked, which again is gathering sort of pace, is Starmer. He let his advisor take the fall, and he was only giving him advice. And that was Morgan McSweeney. He said he resigned. No, he didn't. He was pushed out, but he had to resign, yeah? But the person who actually made the decision, which is Starmer, is still in post. Why is that? And nobody can answer. Advisors advise, ministers make decisions, and that's who's meant to take sort of the fall. So as you can see, we've got these two themes now building up about Starmer. One is his judgment, woeful, lacking, doesn't have any, and the other bit is it's always somebody else's fault.
Well, I know a cabinet minister actually told us that you never get a call from Starmer on an early Monday morning, that even Boris Johnson would wake up on a Monday morning and say, Saturday night I was thinking about this and thinking about that. Starmer, Friday, 6 p.m, he clocks off. He's not going to do anything until Monday midday. People seem to think he's kind of lazy.
Right, I think there could be two answers for that. If you remember, before the general election, he did say, I'll be with my family of a Friday. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I thought, well, you can't actually be Prime Minister if you're thinking you're taking off like 2.5 days a week. It doesn't work like that. You give over yourself full time. We live in a global sort of economy.
Yeah.
Everything's happening everywhere. You cannot just switch off and do a 9-to-5 job. He did say that. We all thought, well, that's a load of nonsense. At the time, he was trying to get his family credentials going. Do you remember, we didn't know what a woman was, but what he's going to show is that he supported his wife, he was there with his family. So that's when that sort of came up. And the other thing, which I think he's doing now, he is so desperate to save himself. All of his time will be taken up calling people, trying to sound things out.
Right.
Is he still going to be there? Maybe covering his tracks on things he might have done. So I think he's working frantically hard. He just isn't doing the running of the country. He isn't calling his cabinet ministers, but he's doing a lot to look after himself. Because if you look at the man, he looks exhausted. Those shots that were grabbed the other night with him at the back of the car, the man looks finished.
Yeah.
I mean, he was grey, he was puffy, his eyes were closed, they were red. So he isn't not working, is he? He's working for himself, which has always been the problem. And I think at PMQs this week...
Kemi was great this week.
I think Kemi was great. I have to say, I think Ed Davey and Stephen Flynn, SNP, Ed Davey, Lib Dems, because Ed Davey said to appoint one paedophile supporter cannot be excused as a misfortune, but to appoint two shows catastrophic misjudgment. And everybody cheered. And that's right, catastrophic misjudgment. Flynn sort of went on a similar sort of vein. He said, you know what, Starmer, you've rolled that pitch for Mandelson that you didn't know. They lied to you. I didn't know. I mean, I did speak to them, but, they told me lies and I fell for them. He said, you roll that pitch for Mandelson. And now, remember, there's a second person in there. We've got a second person. He's made a lord who had connections to a paedophile, Matthew Doyle. And he said, and you're now rolling that pitch for Matthew Doyle. You were hoodwinked, basically.
Yeah.
So he said, you have to be the most gullible DPP, you were a former DPP, head of criminal prosecutions, you are absolutely gullible. In other words, you're trying to hoodwink us, we don't believe you, it doesn't make sense. And then you're right, Kemi came in with, you are stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists, and you are putting the Downing Street Boys Club first. And that... all of those key 3 points, but that one really resonated. and I went to meet in the afternoon and speak to some of the women in the Labour Party, and they just had their meeting with Keir Starmer.
And what are they saying after meeting with Starmer? It must be horrible for the Labour MPs. 5 years ago, they were all anti-Semitic. Now they're being accused of being a party that protects paedophiles.
Well, put it this way, the women in the Labour Party are beyond furious. And some of them have said, and Emma Lewell is one, and she spent a lot of her career working in child prosecution services.
Okay.
And she said, I can't even begin to explain how much it hurts me when people are screaming at me in the street that I'm a member of the Pedo Protection Party.
Gosh.
And I don't think he does understand what people are saying in the public. I don't think Starmer's really got it, that people are saying, how did you allow Mandelson to be given that plum job?
Yeah.
Then you admitted knowing that he'd remained in friendship, a very close friendship with a paedophile. How does that go on? And I think Emma really there, Lewell, sort of nailed it. And she said, and you keep saying things are going to change, Starmer, and they're not. And then another female MP said, you know what, and do any women really have a say in your government? You know, you've got some there, but really, do they have a say? Because all we hear about are former male aides briefing against them, and we don't really think that you've got any sound common sense there, and you certainly don't see it from a woman's perspective. And it is these patterns that are emerging that while Starmer thinks he's survived, and he survived this week by whipping up all of his loyalists, getting to recess, which starts today. So he's got to recess, but they're not. The patterns are emerging, Mandelson, Doyle, and then people are linking it as well to the rape gang inquiry. He never wanted to do that. We had to be dragged kicking and screaming to say he'd do a national rape gang inquiry, which he still hasn't done, by the way, but he said he would. And people are saying, but why are you not looking at vulnerable women? Epstein was about rich, powerful men and vulnerable women. Then we've got sex cases, which is about powerful people, younger people. What's going on there? And people are going to dig now, mark my words, into all of Starmer's past and also the past of the Labour Party.
Okay. So where are we talking about here regards the past of the Labour Party?
Right. So I think, and I remember this at the time, and it's the historic connections between the National Council of Civil Liberties, of which Harriet Harman was on that, and Patricia Hewitt, so they're female grandees of the Labour Party. So they were on that. It later became Liberty, but they were on that. And a group called PI, its nickname was PI, Paedophile Information Exchange. And they were looking to lower the age of consent. And they were talking about it as sexual liberation. And this group that sort of got involved with the National Council for Civil Liberties was from about 1974 to about 1983. Now, people in the Labour Party say, oh no, it was just attached. We didn't agree with it. It was sort of there. However, that sort of sexual liberation and the fact that there is that association, I do believe people will start digging into that. How, why, who was a part of it? Why was that even in their sort of DNA in one way or another?
Yeah.
And worse still, people are going to start digging into Starmer's time at the Crown Prosecution Services and him as the DPP.
My legal teacher and lecturers at university used to tell me CPS really stood for can't prosecute sorry, because they're so terrible at getting anything to court. So when Starmer was DPP, his record, the biggest cases I know of were Savile and John Warboys, the taxi rapist.
Jimmy Savile and John Warboys. So Starmer was head of the Crown Prosecution Services when the decision was made not to prosecute Savile. because there was insufficient evidence. Now, he will say there was a local police force looking at it, and he will say there was a reviewing lawyer looking at it. So it wasn't anything to do with him. Again, McCavity's cat, never around, not him. But in January 2013, after Savile's death, an investigation went into whether the CPS should have sort of delved more. And Alison Levitt, QC, was given the job to look into that. And actually, Starmer said, look into that. So that was his job there. But when she did, she said, actually, she had reservations for what went on. And she said, on the face of it, the allegations were both serious enough and credible enough to have have gone into that. More should have been done. And what does Starmer do? He apologises again. He said it was an error of judgment by those other people, but apologises. So you see this pattern.
Yeah.
Sexual issues, criminal cases, connections there. Always error of judgment, or I didn't know it was somebody else's fault. So that was that one. And then you mentioned again John Warboys. Now, to remind everybody of this, this was a taxi driver in London. And in 2009, he was convicted of 19 charges of drugging people who were in the cab and sexually assaulting 12 and 1 case of rape. And then Starmer, as the DPP, made the decision not to pursue further charges against Warboys following the conviction. And people have said, why was that? And he said, it's all on the CPS file, and now I'm no longer going to be answering any more questions about my time as DPP. And what I am saying is, he's not going to have the choice on that. People are going to start digging there. Now, there's a very strange story that came out this week. Yes, it made the papers. Didn't last that long, but I think it's going to be massive, and it came from nowhere. And this was the story about Court Desk, which is a platform for, like, basically a database for journalists finding out about all criminal cases, and they're all logged on there, and they're going to destroy it. They want to destroy the evidence on there, sort of ASAP.
Why would they want to destroy all the evidence?
Well, their excuse is that this is a data handling issue. That's what they're saying, whereas other people are saying, no, this is about open justice here and who controls the information of criminal cases. Well, I'm just going to throw it out there. Let's look at this. He now knows people are going to start digging into him as DPP when he was at the Crown Prosecution Services, right? All of those court cases, all of those transcripts from the court cases will be there. He doesn't want anybody to see it. Now, you might call me a conspiracy theorist, but all of that now is going to go. Now, I bet journalists, because they're very savvy, they'll be copying these as quick as you like before they are removed.
Yeah.
But that does not bode well. And I'd also say you should never be destroying data like this.
No.
How we get historical context, how we find out about people, how you find out about patterns is through this data. And when you remove it and destroy it, you've lost it forever. And this, I'm afraid to say, will be an absolute disgrace if he does do that. And again, people will look into what were the dates, when he was DPP, and why are we getting rid of this database now?
He really is seemingly in defence mode, survival mode. He's going to do everything he can to last as long as he can. And I don't think he's got much longer to last.
Oh, no, he hasn't. But he should have been removed this week.
Well, you said at the top of the show that they should have been surgical, as if he's some kind of abscess or a tumour that the Labour Party should have just cut when they had the chance.
That's right. He's dripping poison into his party, and more importantly, he's also dripping it into sort of the country, and we can't get on doing work because whilst he's forever trying to survive, he's not doing work. So really, I'd say it's a zombie parliament. Nothing really happened this week. I'm also now hearing it is that bad that civil servants aren't bringing forward policies to be done because they don't think he's going to be there. They don't think the team's going to be there. They might have to do like a reshuffle to keep him there as Prime Minister, that they're not bringing work forward. So not only is it not happening with MPs, it is not happening with civil servants. And I think most of his time he is running round trying to salvage himself and think about how his inner team now is crumbling. So you've had at the weekend his chief of staff has gone, Morgan McSweeney. His head of comms, Tim Allen, has gone. His cabinet secretary, that's the main guy there for the civil service who advised him, has also gone. But Starmer has lost gone through 3 cabinet secretaries, 4 chiefs of staff, and 5 directors of communications in just 18 months. So this crumbling around you, and to appoint every one of them is very difficult. And somebody like a cabinet secretary should be there for about 10 years, not 14 months. So he's getting rid of Chris Wormold now after 14 months. Again, he's taking the blame. He said, oh, you didn't tell me about Mandelson. Oh, you didn't warn me about this. No, it isn't. It's Starmer. And I'm going to tell you, here is going to be the next catastrophic mistake, and this is the appointment of a new cabinet secretary not doing proper due diligence. And I think you saw last night the former cabinet secretary of the Foreign Office come out and say,
so Simon MacDonald, he came out and said the due diligence needs to be thorough. If the candidate mentioned in the media, the candidate mentioned was Dame Antonia Romeo. In my view, the due diligence has some way still to go. So when she was working in New York, she was accused of bullying and harassment and of abusing expenses to the tune of some like 30,000 quid she spent on furnishing her office. And there's some other allegations against her as well of using government rooms and buildings to host her husband and his friends for parties and things.
So she was investigated by the Foreign Office while she was serving as a Consul General. And this is in New York in 2017. And you're right, over allegations of bullying, harassment, discrimination and misusing expenses. Well, can I tell you, all of those are serious claims and issues, aren't they? If you think about how the Labour Party attacked Priti Patel, saying that, she bullied people, her civil servants, never had proof of that, but they said it. Dominic Raab, he bullied his civil servants, he had to go. So before they've even appointed this woman, they're hearing all of these things, and yet they're going to appoint it. And so for a former cabinet secretary to go on the news, he was on Channel 4 News last night saying this, it's like open warfare in Whitehall. And I've never really heard about that before, that civil servants come forward. They're saying his judgment's bad, it's really bad, and look who he's now going to appoint. And the reason I say it's a massive mistake and he's rushing forward again to make a political appointment, which is what he always does. I don't want to hear, I don't want to listen, I'll blame somebody else. Oh, I didn't read the information, they lied to me. It's a political appointment and he's doing it for expediency. He wanted Mandelson there, ignored it all. This was part of the boys' club. He wanted Matthew Doyle to be made a Labour peer. I'm not going to listen to anybody. And he could have stopped that, right?
Yeah.
He could have stopped that. This time, I think he knows his Labour MPs, his female MPs, have got him under the cosh, and he's thinking, oh, panic, I better employ a female at the top of government, not checking if she's the right person, but thinking, oh, to save myself, to appease my female MPs, I'm going to appoint this woman. And what's it all about? Bad judgment, blaming other people, and all about saving his skin. And I've just put in 2 questions today, actually, because there's issues that I don't think can die. He says something and then he never follows it up. I've said, will the Prime Minister bring forward legislation to strip Lord Doyle of his peerage and make a statement? And I've also put a written question in, when does the Prime Minister expect to bring forward legislation to strip Lord Mandelson of his peerage? Remember, he's promising all these things, whiter than white. He was a serious politician. He was going to, bring adult behaviour to government. You remember all of this?
Yeah.
No, he talks the talk and does not do, and people are finding out about that.
Good. Well, there's also worries that now he's beholden to his cabinet and the rest of the Labour Party. Labour's now going to collapse and move towards the left much more aggressively than they ever have done.
Yes, they've got him where they want him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he will be bending over backwards to try and court the left. So we're going to see we've got a collapse in trust in the government. We've got a collapse in Starmer's ability to be able to govern and run the country.
Mm-hmm.
We've now got a collapse in the economy. And you see today the economy is pretty much flatlining. We're all getting poorer. Prices are going up. Growth that this Labour government talked about is not happening. And now we're going to have a collapse to the left, which will mean more net zero. It will mean more class warfare. It will be more attacks on private schools. It will be more tax and spending, more benefits. And he won't be dealing with immigration. He won't be dealing with crime. He won't be trying to stop Islamic extremism. I'm afraid we're going to slide into, I feel, a period of collapse and also misinformation and disinformation that I believe he's pushing out to the public, as well as removing platforms that you could go to for data and information.
Well, speaking of immigration, he's today called out Sir Jim Ratcliffe for Ratcliffe's comments saying that the country's has become colonised, and Starmer saying Ratcliffe should apologise. We've got bigger fish to fry than going after one of Britain's most successful businessmen who's just speaking his mind.
He is, and he's talked about how many people are on benefits in the country. He's talked about, and maybe he said it clumsily, he could have said it better, but certain parts of the country have got 60, 70% of a Muslim population. People are saying the culture's changed, the high street's changed. In schools, English has become the second language. We need translators to go to the NHS, to go to the GPs. So the problem he was pointing out, and he said it in a very harsh way, sort of, again, I was surprised he said it quite so strongly, was pointing out all of Labour's failures. And remember, this was a man, the head of INEOS, before the general election, actually was supportive of Starmer.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's come out and said, oh my God, basically you're a disaster, maybe he swallowed all of the, I will call them lies, of Starmer, who said, I'm going to smash the gangs, I'm going to sort out illegal immigration, I'm going to get growth in the country. And he has come out and said, you're doing none of that.
Yeah. Right, well, let's move from Westminster. Let's move from Starmer to the rape gang inquiry that you've been at today. You're going to go back after you finish recording this. It's, from what you've told me off camera, it just sounds horrendous to sit through and to hear these victims, everything that they've been through and how they've been treated.
Yeah, I mean, they were young, they were vulnerable, and they were abused and taken advantage of. Some of them were in care homes. Some had sort of broken families or things that happened in their family that made them sort of more vulnerable. And nobody at any stage stood in to protect them. And when they were going to children's services, when they were going to the police, when they were going to the council to say, help me, this is happening, they were not listened to, they were not heard, and they took the side of the abuser rather than the young child. And when they went to the NHS and they had, gonorrhea and they had various other, swelling of the pelvis, they'd been abused, they were having terminations. Nobody said of a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, how has this come about, or followed it up, or saw the pattern. So that is absolutely traumatic. And then I look at how did this happen? And it became that the institutions were so politically correct, were so frightened of being called racist, that they would believe a Muslim Pakistani taxi driver before they believed a 14-year-old white working class girl in a care home. Before they would stop and do something, the police, and arrest them or question them, they believed again the perpetrator rather than a girl 12, 13 who was drunk. They said she was the problem because she was underage drinking or underage on drugs. They didn't say, where did you get the drink from? Where did you get the drugs from?
Yeah.
Why is this man double, treble your age there with you and allowed to be with you? So it is all of these questions that have never been answered before. And then going back to the statement about the country being colonised, people have come forward who worked in the councils and said, because the leader of the council, the deputy leader of the council, the head of licensing of taxis, the head of children's home, all of which in certain areas, and one of them's Peterborough, was fundamentally Muslim Pakistani men.
Yeah.
So there was in that regard a sort of a takeover of this council, and nobody asked questions. Everything was hidden, and then you start again connecting the dots, and you can see how easily this was sort of perpetrated, how easily it happened, and how nobody wants to ask questions. So we've heard evidence on that. We've also heard evidence of the different cultures, and actually Britain is known as a high trust society. So we have trust in the police, we have trust in government, we have trust in the NHS, and that trust now has been broken. The fact that we thought they would be able to help us and they would be able to save us, and they didn't. The fact that they never lived up to their duty of care means that trust is crumbling. And we need to stop this collapse in trust, because democracy and our country and what we believe in depends on trust.
Yeah.
We have to believe in the institutions. So we need to, and that's why this rape gang inquiry is so important, we have to clear out those institutions. We have to bring those who failed it to account, because what we don't want to do is to collapse into a free-for-all country with no trust. And that sort of circles back to Starmer for me, because I think he is hastening the collapse of trust in governments, officialdom, and our institutions, full stop. And if that happens, democracy collapses. That's when it becomes mob rule. That becomes when you just don't believe in anything. And that's why I say this rape inquiry is so important, that we absolutely stop the descent into non-trust, as it were, and start building those institutions back up again. Allow these women to have a say, allow them to be believed. And I have seen, and I've put a report together as well, I'm putting together where we can change things. Even electing your councillors and politicians, I think we need to get rid of postal votes. You need to go into the postal box and vote yourself. We can't have communities doing a block vote on their behalf and bringing in leaders of communities, but those people have had no say. Got to change it there. We need proper oversight of children's homes. Some children there, the home's getting paid anywhere from £50,000 to £250,000 a year to look after them. They need to be looking after those children. They need to pretty lock down the establishment so they're not disappearing, not there of a night time, not having men come and collect them. They need to be making sure that they're playing sport, dancing, doing their sums, going out and doing hobbies. They need to be doing that, not disappearing.
Yeah.
So much that can be put together to get this on the straight and narrow. But I'm afraid ignoring the problem is not the way forward. So as I said, harrowing as it is, I'm pleased I'm a part of this rape gang inquiry. But equally, it needs to now force the government to do a full national rape gang inquiry, and we will put our evidence forward, we will put our recommendations forward, but it needs to shame the government into doing theirs too.
It's a huge task, Esther, but thank you for playing your part in it. Gosh, well, as always, I am exhausted from an episode with you. So much information. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. It is. I'm normally full of energy. Good grief. But thank you for watching today's Daily Expresso. Leave your comments, like, share, subscribe, and hit the hype button. We're back again same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.